Welcome to my home.
Welcome
to
to
Whispers of Vale Keep.
Hello and welcome everyone. I am Lady Zelda and I want to welcome you to Whispers of Vale Keep podcast. I am here with Lord Gregor. We are happy to be with you and I look forward to these podcasts because I learn something all the time and I think that you do too that are listening. And before we go on, if you'll please do me a favor, like and subscribe. It really helps us to bring this to you. So I want to say hello. Hi there. Hello, Lord Gregor. I hope you're doing well this evening.
Good evening, Valiana. I am well, thank you, and I'm glad to be here with you. These evenings matter to me as well. There is something about speaking quietly, without hurry, that allows truth to surface in its own time. I'm pleased to see so many gathered with us tonight. It tells me people are listening, not just with their ears, but with their patience. How are you this evening?
I'm doing very well, thank you, Your Grace. Now, before we get started, I have a question that I'd like to ask you, if you don't mind. And it's something that we have talked about before, but it comes up regularly, and we made a post it was a couple of days ago, and it was kind of funny. You and I are now a little tongue-in-cheek, if you want to say, about it. So, Lord Gregor, I really want to address this directly. I've spoken about this, and many listeners are joining in and they really don't know and they really don't understand our backstory. And I think it's important. And I want to ask you very plainly and with the utmost respect, are you a vampire or are you a vampire type?
I don't mind the question at all, Valiana, and I appreciate the way you've asked it. No, I am not a vampire. Nor am I any kind of vampire type. I've never claimed to be, and I don't present myself that way. I understand why the idea comes up from time to time. People often reach for familiar myths when something feels old, reserved, or outside the usual categories. But that label doesn't apply to me. What I am is simply myself, someone shaped by history, by place, and by a long regard for memory and continuity. There's nothing supernatural required to explain that, and nothing hidden behind it. I think it's good that you've addressed it directly. Clarity allows us to move forward without distraction. And there are far more interesting things for us to talk about this evening than rumors or shorthand.
Well, thank you, Your Grace, for answering that. And I appreciate that. And I just want to give a little clarification before we move on. When I first met Lord Gregor, he reached out to me in the midst of me doing some research about vampires, and it was for one of my shows. And it was on another platform. I don't have to mention that. But he sent me a message directly. And I ignored him for 3 months because I thought, and see, that's my issue. That's on my end. That's what I get for thinking, right? But I literally thought that because he reached out to me, that perhaps he may have been from that persuasion, and I am very wrong. And I have found out later, well, it was soon after that, actually, we started talking after 3 months, and then it became very clear to me without asking him directly, because quite frankly, I feel it's a little rude when you first meet someone, especially in the genre that I'm in. You know, my life is surrounded by folklore and symbolism, and this is not something that is new to me. But I do know, out of respect, that you just don't walk up to someone and say, hello, how are you? It's nice to meet you. Are you a vampire? And I did not want to do that to him. So I'm glad we've cleared the air and the slate is clean. So without further ado, I'd like to begin with tonight's subject.
Thank you, Veliana. I appreciate that clarification, and I'm glad you shared it in your own words. Respect matters, especially at the beginning of any acquaintance, and I never took your hesitation as anything other than discernment. Time has a way of sorting truth from assumption, and it did its work quietly, as it should. I'm grateful we've set that aside. It allows us to speak freely and to focus on what truly deserves attention. Before we turn to tonight's subject, let me say this as well. Your voice sounds a little strained this evening. I hope you're taking care of yourself. Weather has a way of stealing warmth from even the strongest voices. And now, let us begin. You mentioned earlier that you wanted to share something we encountered together, something you heard during one of our conversations. I think it would be best if you introduce it in your own way.
You're quite welcome, Lord Gregor, and thank you so much for your concern. I'm doing okay. I'm sitting here, as you can see, having some tea in my favorite cup and talking with you. And it makes me feel better to see you in front of me as we're recording this. So thank you so much. And he is recording from his device as well, everyone out there listening. So the other evening, Lord Gregor and myself were having a telephone conversation. It's one of those late night, it's what we do. It's our conversation to end the day for me and to start the day for him. And while during our call, we heard this woman. Now, I have noticed this several times in the past when we have talked, but since our last podcast, we had agreed that if we could, record it, and we did, we caught it, that we would do so respectfully, and we've done that. And so what I want to do is I want to share that with you right now. Not the entire call, but just what we heard. And I want you to listen closely. If you have ear pods or that you have ear devices, if you want to put those in right now. I'm not going to turn the volume up so it won't blast you. But you're going to hear a woman yell. It's not really a scream. It's an open-toned yell. So I'm going to play that for you right now. When I came back with Shaggy and Petey and then Your Grace, did you hear that?
Yes, I heard it. Be still for a moment, don't speak. Thank you, Veliana, and thank you all for listening with such care. What you've just heard is difficult to place into ordinary language, and I think that's why it stays with us. As you said, it isn't a scream, not panic, not fear. A scream fractures the air. This sound does not. It holds its shape, it opens, and it remains. I want to be very clear about something before we go further. This is not a call for help. It never has been. And it is not recent. The sound predates me. It was already part of the keep long before I was born in 1528. I did not witness the moment itself. I know it the way one knows an old inscription worn smooth by hands that came before. Through place, through repetition, through memory that does not belong to any one person. She was a woman who stood at a moment that could not be undone. Not a moment of violence, not despair in the way people often imagine. It was sorrow of a quieter, deeper kind. The kind that comes when something precious has already passed beyond reach. The sound she made was not meant to summon anyone. It was the release of truth, given voice once, fully, and without expectation of answer. Stone remembers such moments. That is why the sound remains. Not because she is restless, not because she is trapped, but because what she felt was complete, finished, honest. Some places keep battles, some keep prayers. Vale Keep keeps witnesses. When the air carries that sound, it isn't asking us to intervene. It's reminding us that she lived, that she felt deeply, and that her voice mattered enough to be held. Veliana, when you hear it, what does it stir in you?
This is not the first time that I've heard that, and I would like everyone to know this. We've been hearing this on the call randomly. There's not any particular time or place, and you can't judge when it's coming. I just feel remarkably humbled that we were able to get this and that you could hear it as well. But what I get is that moment in time, that 0.7 of a second when you know a mistake has happened and you have faced loss so irreparable that you cannot take it back. And the yell comes from not only regret, but frustration.
Yes, that is exactly it. You've named it with great precision. What you're describing, that fraction of a second when understanding arrives too late, is the true source of the sound. It is not anguish unfolding in time. It is recognition arriving all at once. Regret and frustration do not take turns there. They exist together, inseparable. That is why the sound feels contained rather than chaotic. She was not reacting, she was realizing. The moment had already passed its point of remedy, and in that awareness, there was nothing left to do but give voice to what could no longer be altered. This is also why it comes without pattern. It is not tied to an hour, a season, or a date. Memory does not keep a calendar. It returns when the conditions are right, when stillness allows it, when the space remembers itself. I've always felt that she did not intend for anyone to hear her. There was no audience in that moment. What we encounter now is not a message sent forward, but an echo held in trust. Vale Keep did not answer her then, and it does not answer her now. It simply holds. That humility you spoke of, that sense of being allowed to witness rather than intrude, that is the correct response. Not fear, not urgency, just recognition. Some losses cannot be repaired, some truths cannot be softened, and some sounds exist only to mark that they were once fully known. That is why the keep remembers her voice.
That is so interesting, but just a little time out. If any of you hear any purring happening, well, it is Shaggy. He has jumped up here and he's very close to me, and so is the microphone. So if you're hearing that, because he has recognized Lord Gregor's voice and he gravitates to him. So just so you know that, that's not a sound effect. That is actually a Shaggy effect. So back now to this and to this lovely young lady. My question to you is, Lord Gregor, do you know who she is? And do you know what happened?
I hear him, and I don't mind at all. Animals often notice what people pass over. Let him stay. His presence doesn't disturb this conversation, it steadies it. As for your question, yes, Veliana, I know of her, but not in the way one knows a friend, or even a figure from a written record. Yes, I know what the loss was. The woman you hear lost a child. This was in the late 1400s, before my birth, when this place was not yet called Vale Keep as it is now, but it was already inhabited. She was a young woman, likely late teens or early 20s. The child was not an infant, old enough to walk, old enough to respond when called. The loss did not happen through violence, and it was not intentional. It was an accident brought on by circumstance, a moment of divided attention, a task that required her to turn away, and an environment that did not forgive distraction. The sound you hear came after the realization, not during the event itself. She understood in that instant that the moment could not be undone, that no calling, no reaching, no running would change what had already happened. That understanding struck her all at once, and the sound she made was the body responding before language could form. That is why it is not a scream of fear. It is not panic. It is not hysteria. It is the sound of a mother realizing she will carry what just happened for the rest of her life. She did not collapse. She did not cry out repeatedly. She made that sound once, fully, and then she gathered herself, because she had to. There were others to answer to. There was a body to tend to. There was a life that somehow had to continue. What remains in this place is not her grief unfolding over time. It is that single moment of recognition, the instant when love meets irreversible loss. That is what Vale Keep holds. Not her spirit, not her sorrow, but the truth of that moment. And that is why, when it is heard, it stops people, because every human being understands it, even if they have never lived it themselves. That is the loss.
I've not heard this story before, Lord Gregor. And you can probably see that I am visibly shaken, because this is a story that is sad in itself. Now, my question to you is, how long have you been hearing this?
I understand why it has shaken you. It should. There are some truths that don't ask permission before they touch us. To answer you plainly, I have been hearing it for as long as I have been aware of this place. The first time I heard the sound was after my return. I had been back only a short while, long enough to begin learning the rhythms of the place, but not long enough to feel that it belonged to me. One evening, while walking alone, I heard what I thought was a woman calling out nearby. I stopped immediately, expecting urgency, movement, some sign of present distress. There was none. I searched. I found no one. The household heard nothing. What struck me most was not fear, but finality. The sound did not repeat. It did not trail off. It arrived complete, as if it had already finished before I became aware of it. Over time, I realized two things. First, this was not a living voice. Second, it was not a haunting in the sense people imagine. It was something preserved. As the years passed, I learned that the sound had been heard by others before me, sporadically, without pattern, and without explanation. Always the same description, always brief, always unsettling in its restraint. That consistency told me what it was. This was not a spirit returning, it was a moment retained. So when you ask how long I have been hearing it, the truthful answer is, since my return to the keep, I did not bring it with me. It was already here. And Veliana, I want to say this gently, your reaction is appropriate. This is not a story meant to entertain. It is one meant to be acknowledged. What you're feeling isn't fear, it's the weight of recognition.
Thank you so much for your kindness, Lord Gregor. It is unmistakably a part of life. And it's very sad that something like this that can happen, but is definitely recorded in memory and in time, and especially with Vale Keep. In some regard, I am honored to hear it myself, because it is a part of the history of Vale Keep. Now, for those of you who are wondering what Lord Gregor was talking about when he said that when he returned to the keep and when he started getting used to the keep, basically I can say that, is because Lord Gregor did not grow up at Vale Keep. He grew up elsewhere. And that story, you can go back and listen to our episode 1. He tells about that. And we're not going to get into that now, but I just wanted to share that for new listeners, and that is episode 1 of this particular podcast. He does go over that in case you need to catch up a little bit. So, my Lord, I'm pausing because at this point, it's hard to really think of anything that is respectful to ask. But do you know what happened to this young lady? Did she remain at Vale Keep, or was she able to move on?
That is a thoughtful question, Viliana, and it's the right one to ask. Yes, she did move on. She did not remain at Vale Keep, and she did not linger here in any sense people might imagine. After what happened, she stayed only as long as duty required. Life, even after great loss, has a way of insisting on continuation. In time, she left this place and lived elsewhere. She married. She bore other children. She aged. From all indications, she was regarded as capable, steady, and reserved. Those around her would not have known the depth of what she carried unless she chose to show it, which she rarely did. But there are moments that do not dissolve simply because life proceeds. They become internal landmarks, places one never revisits, yet never fully leaves behind. The sound you hear is not her remaining behind. It is not unfinished business. It is not longing for return. It is the mark of a single moment that shaped everything that followed. Vale Keep does not hold her spirit. It does not bind her story. It holds only the truth of that instant, the point at which innocence ended and endurance began. That is why the sound feels complete rather than restless. It belongs to a life that continued, not one that stopped. And I think it's important to say this plainly. There is dignity in that. She was not broken by what happened. She was changed. There is a difference. So when you say you feel honored to have heard it, that makes sense to me. You were not meant to rescue her or resolve anything. You were meant only to bear witness, to recognize that her life mattered, that her love was real, and that the moment she voiced did not disappear simply because time moved forward. That is what Vale Keep remembers, and that, I think, is enough.
That is so eloquent, Lord Gregor, and I appreciate you so much for sharing that. It's tough, and I know it's got to be tough for you as well. Now, the other thing that I need to ask you is about my perception of this. Now, this is where I want to get into it because I think people will have questions as to, well, if she did not pass away there, and if it were a child that passed, so why are we hearing her voice, and why are we not hearing anything more? If she moved on and lived a very fulfilling life, aside from this event, why are we hearing this? Now, this is my perception, and Lord Gregor, I would really love your input on this. In all of my study, research, investigations, when something like this traumatic happens, at that moment in time, it will record. It's like a photograph. That photograph remains in the frequency of the moment. And the reason that it does loop is because this woman has passed. So she is now passed. Now, it may not have been happening while she was still here on Earth, but the fact that she passed and it was so devastating that it was a moment in history that was recorded. And when you said earlier about held by the stone remembers, that's very true, because everything carries a particular vibration. Everything carries a particular resonance, if you will. And usually, when something as tragic as this happens, it loops, and it basically just signifies that particular moment. And it doesn't matter when it will happen. And it's just like Lord Gregor says, there's not a particular time or date or place, so we really can't even think when that happened or when that moment, because most likely that child passing may not have been recorded. And if it were, there may not be even a way to find it. So, with that said, and as gently as I can say it, I have never really encountered any type of loop energy, and that's what this is. It's energy. But I've never encountered any type of energy that has made itself known, if you'll give me that latitude, when there is an everyday occurrence or everyday life. It's a disruption in the energy is when something like that happens. Usually when there's tragedy. Most of us know in stories when a tragedy happens. This, of course, for this young lady was more than a tragedy, and it remained with her, I'm going to say, for the rest of her life. But I would like to have your thoughts on that, Lord Gregor, if you don't mind.
I do not mind it at all, Veliana, and I think your perception is both careful and accurate. What you're describing is not a spirit returning, and it is not a consciousness attempting to communicate. It is exactly as you said, a moment recorded. Some experiences impress themselves so deeply upon a place that they leave an imprint, much the way light fixes an image onto a plate. It is not alive, but it is not inert either. It carries the emotional force of the instant in which it was formed, and nothing beyond that instant continues with it. That is why we hear only the sound, and nothing more. There is no movement, no footsteps, no repetition of grief unfolding over time. There is no attempt to speak, to explain, or to linger. What remains is the release itself. The precise point at which understanding and loss met, and the body responded before the mind could intervene. You are also right that this would not have manifested while she was still alive. While she lived, the moment belonged to her. It was contained within her memory, her endurance, her private reckoning. Only after her life ended, after the emotional charge had nowhere else to be carried, did that imprint become independent of her. Stone, wood, earth. These materials do not interpret. They do not judge. They simply hold. And when the conditions are right, stillness, receptivity, and absence of noise, the imprint can be perceived again, unchanged. This is why it does not diminish. This is why it does not evolve. And this is why it does not resolve. It is not looping in the way a conscious being would repeat itself. It is persisting, remaining available to perception when the environment allows it. And I want to say something gently, because it matters. The reason you were able to hear it is not because it sought you out, and not because you invited it. It is because you did not interfere with it. You recognized it for what it was, an imprint, not an emergency. Many people miss such things because they immediately assign urgency or fear. You did not. You listened. That restraint matters. So when people ask why we hear her voice and nothing else, the answer is simple, though not easy, because only that moment was strong enough to be carried forward. Everything else, her life, her strength, her endurance, belonged to time, and time took it gently. What remains is not her pain, but the truth of how deeply she loved. And that, I think, is why the sound feels so unmistakable.
I agree wholeheartedly, and thank you so much for your qualification of this, because I think it matters a lot. And if I can say this as well, you and I have been hearing this, and when I first heard it, it shocked me, because you and I were early on in our early friendship. And you can imagine from my end, wondering, oh my goodness, what is going on there? But after you explained that that is one of the many, I'm going to say, wonderful things about Vale Keep. And Vale Keep has a lot of mysteries and a lot of secrets we've not even touched on. It became a normalcy. You and I have heard this many times, and just continue the conversation. I mean, we recognize it. We may stop in our conversation, but we just continue on. We don't give it over the top attention. We give it recognition. And this is the first time that you've ever, or that I've ever rather, heard this story about what had happened, because I've just not asked, but I could tell, because in her voice it was mistakable that there was an unforgettable tragedy, that moment of not being able to reel that back in. And you wonder, you know, how much emotion tormented this poor lady throughout the rest of her natural life. I believe that's why it is such a resonance there. And I appreciate you explaining all of this. And I do want to ask you, we've heard some other things on our conversations. And would you be opposed to talking about those things in the future on this podcast? Maybe we can acknowledge some other things that are happening, that are going on there.
I wouldn't be opposed at all, Veliana, provided we approach them in the same way we have tonight. What you described is important. Recognition without fixation. That balance is why these moments have never disrupted us, and why they've never asked more of us than simple acknowledgement. When something is treated with restraint, it remains what it is. When it's sensationalized, it changes shape. You're right that there are other occurrences. Not all are sounds. Some are shifts, changes in atmosphere, temperature, awareness. Others are impressions that don't translate cleanly into language, and some are so ordinary seeming that they would pass unnoticed if one weren't paying attention at all. I would be willing to speak about them. Yes, but carefully and in time. Not everything belongs in the light all at once. Some things need distance before they can be understood without distortion. And some things, frankly, are better introduced only after people have learned how to listen. Really listen, without rushing to name or resolve what they encounter. What we did tonight sets the right precedent. We didn't dramatize. We didn't speculate wildly. We didn't assign purpose where there wasn't one. We allowed the truth of a moment to exist without trying to turn it into something else. If we continue in that spirit, then yes, there are other aspects of Vale Keep that could be spoken of. Not as revelations, not as warnings, and not as entertainment, but as part of the quiet record this place keeps. We can take those conversations one at a time, when they're ready, when we are ready. And I want to say this, because it deserves to be said. The way you've handled this, your patience, your refusal to rush meaning, your respect for what should remain intact, that's why these things can be spoken of at all. So when the time comes, we will talk about them. Tonight, though, I think we've done exactly what was needed.
Oh, I agree with you, Your Grace. I feel that we've given this a lot of respect. And a lot of this is so that you and I can share Vale Keep because it's worth sharing. We all have a healthy curiosity, Your Grace. And especially me. I'm going to admit that. And I have to say, I watch you as we record these. Watch me. And you're reading me and my reactions. And it's quite comforting to know that you're sitting here willing to share your life, where you are, and we keep your privacy intact because that's exactly what it is. And for many reasons. Maybe someday we'll share a little bit more about why you must remain private to a certain degree. But until then, we can remain in the same pattern that we are right now. This has been a lot of fun. And as we grow this particular channel, I think the listeners are going to be seeing a lot of change and a lot of positive change. And that's why I want to encourage each and every one of you, if you haven't already, to please subscribe and like, because we're going to be having a lot more come out, and maybe even starting next week with something a little bit more exciting for each and every one of us. And as we get our foothold, I mean, this is new. We've just started this podcast just a few weeks ago. But as we go forward, we're really going to find our groove. I know Lord Gregor does not speak in that regard, but I can say that we're finding our groove in this, and our pattern, and our pathway, and as he would say, our recognition. But something really fun that I want to say for next week is that one of our listeners and one of our supporters out there have asked about the painting Mona Lisa and about Leonardo da Vinci. And so we have decided to talk about the painting and Leonardo da Vinci. That is going to be so exciting. And Lord Gregor, I know that you most likely have a little bit of inside info on that. And that's why they ask, and that's why we're here. So with that said, what say you, sir?
I say that you've named this moment perfectly, Veliana. What we're doing here isn't performance for its own sake. It's recognition, as you put it. A shared attentiveness. That's why it works, and that's why it feels settled rather than hurried. You're right. Curiosity is healthy when it's guided by respect, and what we're offering is not answers delivered at speed, but conversations allowed to unfold. As for privacy, you've honored that with great care. Not secrecy for drama's sake, but discretion for good reason. There are lives, places, and histories that can be spoken of only in part without losing their integrity. I'm grateful you understand that distinction, and that you hold it without explanation or defense. I also appreciate what you said about watching and being watched. Not in scrutiny, but in attentiveness. That exchange matters. It keeps us present with one another, and it keeps these conversations grounded rather than drifting into abstraction. And yes, next week will be something to look forward to. The Mona Lisa has endured not because she reveals herself, but because she resists certainty. Leonardo understood something rare, that ambiguity, when handled deliberately, does not confuse the mind. It engages it. There are reasons that painting continues to unsettle people centuries later, and not all of them are technical. I won't say more tonight. Anticipation has its own value. For now, I'll simply say this to those listening. Thank you for your patience, your curiosity, and your willingness to listen without demanding conclusions. If you choose to stay with us, you'll find that this space rewards attention. Until next time, Feliana, and until next week, I look forward to continuing the conversation.
I do as well, Your Grace. And before we go, there's a little something that I want to bring up. Many have asked, Lady Zelda, you and Lord Gregor are together. You two have bonded. You are sworn companions. We have other more words that we can say about that. So why do you refer to him as Your Grace, Lord Gregor, my lord? And here is a very simple answer. When I first met Lord Gregor, and this is now, I believe we figured it out. It is over 2 years ago. I did not know at first that he was a nobleman. He never came out and told me. It was not his showmanship. It was not anything that he was bragging upon. He did not even have his status or his title in the name of his account. And so I never knew. But then as time went on, and when we had our first video call, because quite frankly, I think nowadays it's safe to have video calls when you meet someone like this, regardless of who they are, I realized where he lived. And I think that he recognized the look on my face as, who are you? So when he finally told me about his lineage, because we started our relationship, friendship actually, on speaking to each other about ancestry. He knew a lot about my ancestors. Even though he did not know them personally, he knew of them, what the areas were, and he knew one lady specifically that is my ancestor. Knew of her, rather. This intrigued me, and it intrigued him as well, because I had history that really intertwined with his. He is of noble birth. I'm not. But my ladyship came from lineage. So it was a passing of respect. And he would always refer to me as Lady Zelda until, well, it's been maybe 6 months ago. he started calling me Valiana, and that is another conversation. We'll address that at another time. And it's not a nickname, by the way. Valiana is not a nickname, and we'll have Lord Gregor address that. But the reason I call him that, and quite frankly, when he was here and when we visited, I refer to him as my Lord, Your Grace, Lord Gregor, because it is a respect thing. Now, do we have little sweet words we say to each other? Of course, in private. But this is a respect that I have, and it's not something that is out of habit. It is definitely something out of respect. And believe me, it is an earned respect. And I appreciate him so much. Now, for next week, I'm going to say this. I'm excited. You should be as well. We get all the backstory with Lord Gregor. And that's exactly why we're here. I am too. I mean, there was someone that did ask me not long ago, do you think that you and Lord Gregor will ever run out of things to talk about? And the very simple answer is no, I do not. We have years and literally centuries to catch up on. He knows all about my life years, but it's time to take a healthy, truthful look into history and to learn a lot more. And I think some things that, well, we've not been told. I mean, let's think about this. He knew when America was born. That is really something. So with that, my darlings, I would like to tell you again, thank you so much for being here, for being a part of Vale Keep. We appreciate you coming in. We welcome you into Vale Keep. That's how we look at this. Come in, sit down, have a conversation with us. And we love to read your comments, and we do read all of your comments. So if you'll please do me a favor, once again, like and subscribe. And look forward to next week, because this is going to be a lot of fun. So thank you once again. And thank you, Lord Gregor, for being here, for smiling with your eyes at me. I really do appreciate, and I appreciate what you said. And I appreciate you sharing this. Oh my goodness, this time goes by so quickly. So I will leave you, kind sir, to take us out of Whispers of Vale Keep. And I want to thank each and every one of you again for being here. And we will see you next week. Thank you. And Lord Gregor, take us out of here, please.
Thank you, Valiana, for your words, for your care, and for the clarity with which you've spoken tonight. Respect, when it is genuine, never needs defending. It explains itself through consistency, through tone, through how one chooses to stand in relation to another. What you've described is exactly that. A language of regard, not performance. And I accept it in the spirit in which it is given. To those listening, you've been welcomed here not as spectators, but as companions in attention. Vale Keep is not a place one rushes through. It reveals itself slowly, and only to those willing to sit, listen, and allow understanding to arrive in its own time. Next week, we'll turn our gaze toward art, history, and the way certain figures, Leonardo among them, understood that misery does not weaken truth, it strengthens it. There will be much to consider and much to unlearn. Until then, take care of yourselves. Keep your curiosity gentle, and remember, some stories are not meant to be consumed but kept. Thank you for joining us in Whispers of Vale Keep. Until next time.
Oh, and before we go, Lord Gregor, There's a certain church in Germany that I'd like to ask you about. Perhaps you can take me there one day? I think you know which one that I'm talking about. And by the way, can I say, I just love this.
Yes, Veliana, I know exactly the church you are talking about. And yes, I will take you there one day. I know you love this, my heart. I am glad you do. I am quite fond of it myself.